That's right. You're listening to another episode of the Co-Main Event Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. I'm Chad Dundas. That's Ben Folks. We are longtime MMA journalists. And for the last 13 years, we've been meeting here every week to break down all the action in the wild, weird, and occasionally wonderful world of mixed martial arts. Ben, big show this week.
Yeah.
Very big show. We finally got answers this week to one of the biggest questions in MMA over, I guess at this point, the last couple years. And the answer that we got was relatively shocking, as Monday we learned that in 2026, when its current broadcast deal expires, UFC events will be moving off of ESPN and more or less exclusively onto Paramount Plus, at least in the US, with some events simulcast on CBS. And man, there are some potentially huge implications, which we will talk about today. So it probably goes without saying that that'll take up a good portion, maybe all of this show. I don't know. But we've also got UFC 319 this weekend because it all happens at once. When it rains, it pours. So we will
Just weeks of nothing, weeks of dog shit, Apex cards, weeks of scrounging around and be like, you and me sending each other email like, I don't know what the fuck we're going to talk about this week. And then all at once, here we go.
Yeah. So hopefully we can get to UFC 319. We also got some listener mail, of course. We will try to squeeze that in as we go. Basically, it was not a great week to send us listener mail, which we apologize for. So we will try to get to your questions eventually. I promise. Today, this week might be a little bit tight because the UFC is heading to Paramount. And Ben, one thing that we did expect is that this would be an absolute mega deal, and it is, with a 7-year, $7.7 billion announcement on Monday, though people keep saying that this is, quote, heavily backloaded. So take that for what it's worth. And, of course, perhaps most shocking of it all, at least according to the initial announcement, though the plot on this has thickened a bit as Monday wore on yesterday, at least the potential move away from pay-per-view and the idea that if you sign up for Paramount Plus at whatever cost, you will get access to all of the UFC's flagship fight cards, including the numbered events that traditionally have been sold to us as pay-per-views. If that turns out to be true, it has the potential, man, to fundamentally change how fans access the UFC's content. So there are a million different ways to approach this. But let's start here. I was astonished, frankly, to find out that the UFC is headed to Paramount, a company that was barely even, if at all, mentioned during the last few years that we've been discussing where the UFC was going to land. We thought Netflix looked like the front runner. We thought there was a chance it would stay on ESPN. We thought somebody like Amazon or Apple might swoop in and make a surprise deal. More than anything, we thought, especially on this podcast, that the UFC programming was likely, very likely, to end up being split over a number of different platforms. Now, aside from the eventual fate of things like Tough or Dana White Contender Series, it appears that none of that happened. So how surprised are you that we're sitting here on Tuesday afternoon talking about Paramount?
Very surprised. That was not a name that even came up when we were discussing it. And honestly, also very surprised that we're getting one home for all the UFC stuff. It seems like even the UFC was surprised because after this announcement on Monday, the Dana White was out there doing the rounds. Also, TKO executives like Mark Shapiro and Ari Emanuel were out there doing the rounds. And on a CNBC appearance, Mark Shapiro was saying that originally they were talking with Paramount about just selling them the fight nights, 30 UFC fight nights a year. And then after this, this merger or this purchase by Skydance Media that bought the controlling stake in CBS, that's been in motion for a long time. Once that was finally finalized last week, he said in the next 48 hours, they made the deal for everything. And that is like, that's, I think, I hesitate to even say this because I feel like I'm going to curse it. It feels like better news as a fan than we dared to hope for out of the UFC. Because this is what we were kind of girding ourselves for, was that, for one thing, they'd find a way to fucking keep pay-per-view going, even though everybody else seems to acknowledge that it's a dying way to do this stuff. We also felt like, man, they are going to split this shit up between 2 or even 3 different homes, that 3 different streaming services that you need. It's what TKO did with WWE. You now need 3 separate subscriptions to follow all the WWE stuff, and it looked like that's absolutely the model they're going to follow with the UFC. We thought only going to get more expensive and harder to watch this shit. And so seems like the UFC is kind of getting everything they want, right? You're like you said, this thing is supposed to be backloaded, but even if you just go by the averages, that you're averaging $1.1 billion a year, even if you're not getting that in year 1 or year 2, that's basically doubling what your guarantee was for ESPN. Now you're giving up the pay-per-views for now. We will, I'm sure, get to this question because, you know how these people do. There's a lot of paths to the waterfall. There's a lot of different ways to make us pay for the premium shit. And I expect that at least at some point they will try to explore some of those different ways. But at least for now, being told, pay one price for Paramount Plus, and whatever that price ends up being at first, I think we know it's going to go up afterwards. But it's also probably still, at least for a while, going to be cheaper than the $30 a month that ESPN was going to be asking people for. And if you're doing away with pay-per-views, you end up with a pretty good deal for fans. You're lowering the barrier to entry, which to me is encouraging. It's encouraging as somebody in the media space in this sport who would like, ideally, for this sport to stop actively driving people away from being interested in it.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Yeah. You know how you get your news on social media these days? You end up walking in the middle of the conversation. And this is what happened to me yesterday morning. I woke up, I started seeing these tweets about the broadcast deal, about how great it was for the UFC, about how much money they were going to get. I started scrolling back, and when I saw that it was Paramount, man, I was shocked. I don't know anybody who predicted exactly this, right? It looked for all the world like we were headed to Netflix or staying on ESPN. So the fact that I woke up yesterday morning to people talking about Paramount was pretty unreal, to be honest. And as you said, the UFC essentially got what it wanted with the money that it wanted, with the money it had predicted and said out loud that it was going to get. And this is a deal. I think this helps both companies, man. Obviously, Paramount needs programming. They kind of need a restart with Paramount Plus. And just like ESPN wanted for ESPN Plus, now they get this guaranteed year-round sports programming with a guaranteed number of events each year, with a hardcore fan base that we think will follow it to this streaming platform. And at the same time, you got to say that it benefits the UFC. Paramount Plus has 77.5 million subscribers, according to recent reports. ESPN Plus has about 24 million. So that is a huge increase. Disney actually announced last week that it's going to stop reporting subscriber numbers for ESPN Plus, Hulu, and Disney Plus, which is, Netflix does the same thing. So it's not all that unusual. It's also not that great. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing where I could see a lot more people being interested in the UFC product. The hardcore fan base, as I said, is going to go over there. And I would bet a lot more people are going to check out the UFC product, especially if there's no more pay-per-view. We've kind of seen this happen with WWE, right? That now it's over on Netflix. People can watch it. It seems more accessible. And it almost feels like, in a weird way, this move satisfies Dana White's long-standing fetishization of the old school boxing days, right? Where the biggest events were available on free TV, and he talks on and on about how that's how he got into boxing, and a lot of people got into boxing. And honestly, that kind of seems like where we are with the UFC right now.
Okay, I didn't want to talk about the network TV element of this thing, especially because I understand we get excited. You know, we still long for that mainstream acceptance, don't we? We still just want to be told that we're as good and worthy of love as professional football and baseball and basketball, all that kind of stuff. We have that inferiority complex in the sport. And so when they come around, they say, hey, look, this is going to be on Paramount. And again, right now, the messaging about what's going to be on CBS and how a lot of this is going to work seems almost shockingly vague and contradictory at times. It seems like they haven't even discussed it among themselves.
They've been too busy throwing money up in the air.
I guess so.
Swimming around like Scrooge McDuck in a pool full of money. They've been too busy doing that to talk about what's going to be where.
Because especially you have Dana White and Mark Shapiro saying directly contradictory things about pay-per-view and whether pay-per-view could ever be a part of this. But you also have them going on and Mark Shapiro saying, hey, most, if not all of the, like, what are we going to end up calling them premium live events?
Yeah, PLEs, baby. PLEs, baby.
Now that we don't call them pay-per-views anymore, are going to also be simulcast on CBS, which that to me seems, first I was like, I don't quite believe you, because how are you driving Paramount Plus subscriptions if people could also just watch it on CBS? And driving subscriptions is going to have to be where Paramount's focus is, because right now, if nothing changes, they're going to just lose a ton of fucking money on this deal.
And they already have been losing money. They're
and like you mentioned, their subscriber number, there, at least when you look into entertainment reporting type stuff on this, there's a lot of people being like, you don't know how many of those are actual ongoing subscribers and how many, like, you've tried to watch some shit on Paramount Plus, right? Where they're just like 7-day free trial. And you're like, fuck yeah, I'll stick 7-day free trial. I'll set my calendar alarm for 5 days from now to go off and tell me to cancel this shit. You know, like, so you get counted on their subscribers for that. So you don't know exactly what we're doing, but like they would need to increase subscribers and or increase the price in order not to just end up losing a ton of fucking money on this.
Yeah.
And so we get excited thinking, because it's like, it would be a big deal if you had like some UFC 300 level shit and it's on CBS, then yeah, maybe we get some new fans in the sport. Maybe we get back to a growth era of MMA and not just a pure cash out era that the UFC has been in for a while. But I also am a little bit skeptical about what will end up, because it's not like people, it's like they forgot we've been doing network TV for a while.
Yeah,
UFC has had several events on ABC. Not like they had a UFC on ABC event pretty recently, and it just does not really rate in that way. Like, it does not make a big difference in terms of mainstream visibility, in terms of who you hear talking about it or anything. Like, it doesn't seem to change anything. It might as well just be on ESPN Plus. And like, people getting excited, being like, all right, MMA is headed to CBS. And here's where, as an old head, I must correct you on a fact. MMA is headed back to CBS. CBS has had like maybe more different MMA brands than any other network TV. They were the first ones through the door. They had their first live network, like, primetime TV event with Elite XC Primetime, where Kimbo Slice went out there and popped James Thompson's ear. That was the first one. Then they went through Elite XC, that whole, some ups and downs, one might say, with that one. Then they were in business with Strikeforce, had the Nashville Brawl on CBS, and they kind of decided after that one, we don't like this shit that much anymore. This seems like a problem, and moved away from it. But then they came back to it in 2023. They had that Fedor versus Ryan Bader fight on CBS. Is like the only one, and then they shuffled it back off to Showtime. But it's like Paramount owned Bellator. They had the whole shit right there. So like, they've been in the MMA business back and forth for a while. So it's not like this is as new ground on network TV as people like to tell themselves. And it seems like maybe you could do something better if you don't go the same route that the UFC has always done when it comes to the network TV cards. Where, like, we saw, especially toward the end of that Fox deal, where UFC on Fox were some of the weakest cards.
Yeah.
And like you just weren't really trying that hard on that because because that money was guaranteed to you anyway. You wanted to save the good shit for the pay-per-view. Maybe with that calculation being different, you will see better offerings on network TV if they actually do some shit where the pay-per-views end up being like on both CBS and Paramount. That maybe you'll feel like there is an actual difference. But right now, I think we understandably get a little bit excited because it just feels like something new. But
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna like be the rising tide that lifts all the ships.
Yeah. I feel like network TV is something that really appeals to these executives and maybe these slightly older dudes, right? Like Dana White, who has these fond memories of whatever he remembers on boxing on network television. I feel like for the hardcores, it's kind of even totally irrelevant because we're going to be watching that shit anyway. If they do end up going to the White House and putting that shit on CBS, I could see some people tuning in for that, for better or for worse. But like that seems like a legitimate draw for them. We got this question from our guy Jared, aka J Dog. This message came in via our merchandise shop, which is maybe the first time that has ever happened in the history of this show.
I didn't know you could do that.
I didn't know either, but shout out to our guy J Dog for being a pioneer up in this piece. He writes, "No more $80 pay-per-views in addition to whatever I pay for shitty ESPN Plus. I'm fucking glad. My monster shrine prayers to the MMA gods have been answered. What do you boys think about this exciting news?" Now, Ben, I want to approach this cautiously.
Okay.
Because we have all been around the UFC for a long time, and we know full well that there is often a difference between what they promise and what they delivered. And I don't think the price of being a UFC fan has ever gone down before.
Yeah,
It's
yes.
only gotten more expensive. So maybe take everything that's being said right now with a grain of salt. But as things stand at this moment, it seems at least possible that the price of being a UFC fan might maybe possibly be going down if they complete this deal the way they're talking about it. Right now, I think, or I read online, Paramount Plus has a quote unquote premium tier that is $12.99 a month, and that's the premium tier, and then the most basic tier is $7.99 a month. Is the price of Paramount Plus going to go up? Almost certainly, right?
Yeah.
But how much? And if you are a person who buys pay-per-views, how much would it have to go up before you're not saving money? It would have to go up a lot. And as soon as I put this on Twitter, I got a bunch of replies. People were like, well, I don't pay for UFC pay-per-views, so this is going to end up being more expensive. I get it. But if you are stealing pay-per-views, you don't totally factor into the equation that we can talk about here.
Yeah. Also, if you're stealing pay-per-views, can't you just keep stealing pay-per-views? Because I don't think that the move from ESPN to Paramount is going to be the firewall that stops online piracy of UFC events.
Yeah.
The way I understand it, based on when I did that big story for The Athletic about the UFC claiming to do a bunch of crackdowns on piracy, the main holes in the net that are allowing piracy are international TV deals. Because the UFC is like, we got a TV deal in fucking Liechtenstein, and all you need is one guy out there getting it that way, and he can pirate it. And so that'll probably continue. But you're right. Like if it goes up to $20 a month, which seems entirely reasonable and probably not that long it would take them to raise that price, like for the tier where you can get access to every single UFC thing, it's still kind of a deal for UFC fans. And I also think there's really something to be said in a couple different ways about taking away the calculation of, is this one event worth my money? Because if it's just a subscription price, and the subscription price gets me in the door and I can choose once I'm in what I want to, what I think is worth the time to invest in it, you take away me looking at the next pay-per-view lineup and going, 80 fucking bucks? Is this shit worth 80 bucks? Do I just care about maybe one or two fights? And will I be able to see the important clips of that on Twitter or on social media somehow immediately right afterwards, like before you can manage to yank it down. Like now, if you just get me in the door for the subscription price that I like, as you like to say about ESPN, will set and forget, then I stop the same level of scrutiny with these cards. Now, that then gets you into a question of incentives for the UFC.
Right.
And that question has been a big one for a while now.
Yeah, we got this question from Devin Scott that says, "Hey, Chad and Ben, will I applaud the end of the pay-per-view model and am still in shock that the cost to watch this sport is somehow going down?" I'll just parenthetically, I'll add, maybe.
For now.
I half expected Dana to ask viewers to enter a Power Slap promo code. I can't help but worry. I mean, as a side note here, the fate of Power Slap, as far as we know, remains unknown.
Well, okay, one thing that was encouraging to me is when I saw somebody say that they got confirmation the Ultimate Fighter, Dana White's Contender Series, Road to the UFC, the Asian specific one, those are all not included in this deal, which makes me think that at least Paramount was like, you can keep that. Like, and like, we're at least if there's some discernment there, if we're like making some decisions about like what we want, what we don't, then at least that, like, if they don't want Ultimate Fighter, they don't want Contender Series, they definitely don't want Power Slap. So thank God somebody is at the helm there who's being like, hey, we just want the real shit, man.
Yeah. Devin Scott goes on, "I can't help but worry we are just swapping one devil for another. Sure, we won't have to shell out $80 for a card anymore, but without the pay-per-view carrot, will there be any incentive to give us anything more than the UFC Fight Night guys from the gym down the street cards? I'm bracing myself for a future of uninspired, shrug-worthy cards where the most compelling matchup is my willpower versus the remote control. Am I too cynical or am I just a realist?" Now, let's throw this caveat in there that, as we said, Dana White, as Dana White is wont to do, made some conflicting statements yesterday. First, you had Mark Shapiro saying no more pay-per-view. You had reports on CNBC saying no more pay-per-view. Then Dana White comes out and he paints a picture that provides a little bit more wiggle room, right? He's saying, well, maybe you can have a one-off, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing about that. Dana's still got pay-per-views to sell for the rest of this year.
Yeah, see, right? That's kind of what I thought after I saw that. I was like, did they get everybody excited about the end of pay-per-view and then go, we still got like 5 fucking pay-per-views?
So maybe the message like, hey, pay-per-view is dead, here, buy UFC 319 this weekend, is not a great one for him right now. So that might factor into it. But everyone who's been around this sport long enough knows anytime something positive happens, you got to ask, what's the catch? And is it possible at this point that the catch is going to be like, just like when they took the lumpiness out of the business, it seemed like, just like once we had 43 events a year over on ESPN and it was all guaranteed money, does the incentive to put on big fight cards dissipate even more?
I mean, I guess a lot depends on, like, we saw this toward the end of like their deal with ESPN, right? Where when they both started kind of leaking stuff about their dissatisfaction with the other party, right? And ESPN was basically being like, we think that they're putting on weak cards. The pay-per-views aren't good enough. That's why people aren't buying them. The UFC turn around and being like, they raised the price too much, too fast. And also ESPN Plus just doesn't fucking work a lot of the time, which I know this is a separate issue, but man, ESPN Plus, you got a reckoning coming, at least from me and my subscription dollar. You're really going to make me question, like, how much do I really want to see NHL games, which is the only thing you've got left, especially on your broke ass platform. But there was clearly some discontent with what they're putting out there because they had taken so much of the damn lumpiness out of the business. Now they're taking even more out. But see, the thing is, you get to a point where you go, so where do people go? You got good fighters still. You've still got good fights you can make. If you take it away your incentive to make really good pay-per-view cards or really good numbered events, does that just lead to you spreading them out more equally so that, you get to the fighters? Do we just go to them and be like, hey, it's no longer a demotion to be on a UFC Fight Night card? Because they're all kind of the same, man. They're all on the same platform. There's no pay-per-view points, which that's a whole separate issue. Yet again, even when we look around at the sport and we see a development where we go, holy shit, it looks like the fans might be kind of winning this time. Fighters still not.
No.
Still not winning.
Got a question about that we'll get to here in a second.
But it's like, does it lead to you spreading out the talent more? And how will that actually feel if it happens? Will it feel like just a flattening where it just kind of seems like, this is the weekly show? Or do you still try to load up these numbered events so that they feel special, especially if they're going to be the thing that you're hoping is driving Paramount subscriptions? That's the part that I think it will be interesting to see, because it's like they took that lumpiness out of the business in a way where the UFC went, hey, the pay-per-view going to be what it's going to be. We're not, and also the declining pay-per-view sales just in general, I think it just made them a lot less motivated. It used to be feast or famine, like they had, like that was the lifeblood of the entire business, was selling pay-per-views. And that was not that long ago. Like when I was doing a story on this, I realized that was 2015 was the year we got the good information from, when they had undergone that sale and they were trying to pitch it to new investors. And you could see residential commercial pay-per-views accounted for 51% of all content revenue. And content revenue was the biggest slice by far. It was like 76% of all UFC revenue. And so it was so much a pay-per-view business. And fast forward 10 years, and it's like, that's really not the case. You're getting paid by the broadcasters just to put on a show. You're getting paid by site fees just to put on a show. Pay-per-views were already in decline, so it's not like a huge loss to be finally pulling the plug on it. But it's like, what do you do with those fights now? You're still going to have them, right?
Yeah.
So they got to go somewhere. I don't know if it'll get, the business will get so unlumpy that it is just entirely flat, like a goddamn hotel bed sheet. But it does seem like it has to affect them some way, because like incentives have been the thing that seem to most clearly predict what the UFC is going to do and how hard they're going to try.
Yeah. Well, and one thing we know for sure is that TKO is out here twisting this dish rag as tight as they can to get every drop of monetary value out of it. So if there is an opportunity for, whether it be like a John Jones return or a Conor McGregor return or whatever, there's an opportunity for them to say, pump the brakes, this one still costs $80. We know they absolutely will do that. We got this question from Jefferson Darcy, who writes, with the new Paramount deal doing away with the pay-per-view model, will the champions be losing out of those sweet pay-per-view points? If so, what's the point of being the champ? Recognition, the chance to try to pry out and pawn those little jewels that they put in the belt after each event? Those are glass, Jefferson. How much do rhinestones go for nowadays? He's right. No more pay-per-views obviously leaves pay-per-view bonuses for champions in limbo. And as he says, that's kind of the whole shit of being UFC champion in many ways. The UFC already admits itself that these belts are ornamental, right? So for fighters, the whole point and the whole thing that we are told over and over again in this sport is fight your way to the top. And that's when it pays off, because that's when you get the pay-per-view bonus. If that's gone, what now? What now will be the standard operating procedure for champions who would otherwise get these points?
Don't you dare underestimate the ability to motivate UFC fighters, especially the younger and more naive ones, with just the belt itself, just the ego boost of being able to call yourself champion. Especially, I think we've seen this in so many ways, right? Where it's just like you think this ought to be a big deal and a big shift that the fighters, especially the ones who are established, the ones who are anything close to a star now, would demand to be made whole for, because you have an existing contract with the UFC right now. Like if you're Dricus du Plessis, if you're Ilya Taporia, you're somebody like that, You have an existing contract with them that says points on the pay-per-view, and that's how you have been led to believe your entire career, your entire way up. That's how you're going to make the big money. That's why you want to become champion. And then they change the entire landscape of the sport right under your feet. And what do they give you to make up for the money that they have just taken from you and put into their own pockets? They give you, what are you going to do? You're already under contract. Yo, do you want to challenge it in court? Would you like to go to court with us? Because we'll tie you up for years. We got plenty of money to spend on lawyers to tie you up for years. Plus, I don't know if you've noticed, but we have the United States president in our back goddamn pocket. Do you want to go to court with us? Obviously, you don't. You just spend the best years of your career not making money and losing money on lawyers. And, that's how they dissuade these people from even trying it. But it's like we saw that same thing happen to them when they did away with Fight Night sponsorships, when they made that Reebok deal. Because you had a lot of fighters who maybe it wasn't explicitly in their contracts, but a lot of those guys would tell you they signed new deals with the UFC being told, hey, look, we know the money isn't maybe what you were hoping for, but as long as you're up there and you're winning fights, you're going to all your fights are going to be pay-per-view fights. And so you're going to be able to turn around and say to a sponsor, I'm on the main card of the biggest events. That's where you want to be seen. Give me some money, and they're going to pay you. And so it was like they were using sponsors to subsidize fighter contracts instead of paying them out of their own pocket. Then when they see an opportunity to be like, nope, no more of that. If you want to sponsor, you want your logo on a UFC broadcast, you pay the UFC and the UFC only. That was just another way of them rerouting money that was going to the fighters, putting it in the UFC coffers, and giving the fighters really nothing in terms of compensation for that. They gave them the outfitting pay, but that was just like, I'll give you $5,000 just to like show up and not be a jerk about it. And now we're seeing the same thing. Like, will there be some kind of like nominal boost to them for like if you're fighting in the main event? Maybe, but it's not going to be like the reason the pay-per-view points were so big was it was that at least you had the possibility, hey, if I become a star in the UFC, I become a Conor McGregor level star or even something close to that. That's how I go from making like pretty good money to making life-changing money. That's how I go to making actual pro athlete money, is that way. And now they're taking that away from you. And you're still under your existing contract, even though they have just removed one of the big things that was in there that was an avenue for you.
Yeah.
But what we know is like existing the fighters who are already there, they might get mad about it. They might grumble about it a little bit. But the younger fighters, a guy like Anthony Hernandez, a good example. We just saw him looking like a guy who could really be something at middleweight. He's on his way up. They're just going to look around and they're going to go like, all right, look, hey, Dricus du Plessis might not love it when we take away his pay-per-view points, but how long is he going to be champion for? Maybe another year, maybe 2 years. These guys cycle through. The young guys will come up and this will be the only reality they know. Just like the only reality Anthony Hernandez knows is UFC outfitting pay. He never got $50,000 to wear a hat down to the cage, like he never got 30 grand for a sponsorship banner. Like none of that shit has ever happened. So he doesn't miss it. And that's, I'm sure, the calculation that they're going with here. Plus they're going, if anybody's complaining, we'll ask one of the managers who we also keep in our back pocket to just tell them to be cool about it. And they will. So I'm sure they're not worried about it.
You know what is kind of funny and also obviously a sad commentary is that we are sitting here talking about the loss of pay-per-view points for champions without even a mention of the fact that this company just made a $7.7 billion television rights deal and fighters got 0% of that. And the reason that we're not talking about that is that's just great. We take that for granted. That's just in this sport, man, that's a given. Yeah, of course they're going to over and over again, continually every time make huge, increasingly large fortunes off these television rights deals. And of course, fighters are not going to get any of that because that's how it works in this sport. Meanwhile, in any other quote unquote mainstream professional sport, they would never play baseball again. If the owners tried to do this shit, baseball would cease to exist in this country. Even if they tried to, if they were like, hey man, we'll give you what, 40%? Never would they play ever again. And so that just tells you, man, how one-sided this industry is and how conditioned we all are to accept it in a way that continues to kind of blow my mind. Because look, man, we could sit here and have pie in the sky conversations all day. We know UFC fighters aren't going to do anything about this. Like there will be no collective action or kind of significant push to try to get a piece of that broadcast money, even though they are the product, right? Very few people tune in to see Dana White's orange head bobbing around outside the cage in the front row. People tune in to watch the fights. They are the product, and yet they catch 0% of these broadcast deals, and they won't do anything about it. Except I have to point out the one time somebody did do something about it, the UFC paid out hundreds of millions of dollars in a class action lawsuit settlement, which might be an indication that if you are successful in doing something, whatever that may be about this, sometimes you can get some money in it. Sometimes you can get some money out of it, but
if you're willing to invest years and years
right,
and lots of time and energy into
we would be
doing
naive. We would be naive to say that they will do anything about that. And I guess that, I mean, does that make fighters even more interchangeable now than they even were during the ESPN Plus days? Just cogs in the machine where, you know, you can basically shuffle the deck and throw out any two random cards, and it's going to be good enough for whatever fight night, or maybe even now a pay-per-view PLE that you're going to put on.
Yeah, it does depend somewhat on like what kind of pressure can Paramount bring to bear on the UFC if they don't like how it's going. And if they're saying, hey, not as many people are signing up or staying signed up, or maybe we think that the quality of what you're giving us is the problem here and not what we expected. Like when they say like this deal is front loaded, what does that mean in terms of like how much can we lean on the UFC to give us what we want? But it's also kind of the thing, like if you get into a situation where Ilya Topuria wants a better deal and he's just like not fighting, and Paramount is sitting there being like, man, the last Ilya Topuria fight was the biggest increase in signups that we've seen. Give us another Ilya Topuria fight. Like, can the pressure work that way? Like that, I think would be an important question, because if the UFC is just totally insulated and they're just like, you will get the slop that we put in the pan, then, as we've seen, the UFC is going to try to make it so that they're getting the most money from the broadcast partner while paying the least out as they can to the fighters. And especially it's like if you've got some guy where his per fight guarantee is super high, and if there's no real added benefit to you to having that guy fight 2 or 3 times a year, wouldn't you be better off having him fight once a year? That's all you need, really. And so, like, if as long as you're meeting your contractual obligations to him, then maybe you feel like it's fine. I don't know. There's a lot of that I think that we still haven't seen. I think that's, like I said, the thing that does worry me a little bit is, as we've seen, the UFC is very incentive driven. And if TKO has come along and been very good at removing a lot of those incentives and making it so they're just making a ton of fucking money, no matter what happens. And my hope is that, like, because that part, like the thing is, like, if we make it easier to get into being a fan of this sport, and if you are delivering a good product that seems like you actually give a shit about creating and keeping fans, then this shit could be primed to grow. You could be in a good position to be on a upswing rather than just sort of like flatline maintaining. And yet nothing about what I know about how the UFC operates makes me think that that's where the focus will be. The focus is just on squeezing for every last penny.
I will add as a footnote to that part of the conversation that the UFC has never parted ways with a broadcast partner on good terms.
They've never re-upped with a broadcast partner, really, other than like some Spike TV stuff, right? Like
Wait, Spuke? You're talking about Spuke TV right now?
Every time you could see it 2 different ways, right? It's like every time their rights come up for a renewal, they get a better deal than what they had before. But they also get a better deal, like they keep going somewhere else. And so it does seem like at least some part of it must be TV partners kind of being like, we've seen what there is to see here. We could let these people walk. But you know, they keep getting what they wanted. You know, they every time they say like, hey, the big growth area is going to be that we are going to get a massive increase when these rights come up, and they do. Doubled it here, so that's pretty good.
Are you ready for the tinfoil hat part
By
of
all
the
means.
conversation?
By all means.
Okay. We have to say that this is another instance where the UFC lands squarely in the middle of another Donald Trump adjacent business sphere. And like I said, there's a certain amount of conspiracy talk that comes along with this discussion. You have to make some leaps, but you also can't ignore this stuff at this point, man. Like there are some dots that do in fact connect in order to make this deal. And what does that all mean? I don't know. And when you talk about this stuff, people are going to be mad no matter what we say. Some people are going to say we don't give enough credence to the conspiracy. Some people are going to say we are making mountains out of molehills. But like, I think that you have to at least discuss this aspect of it. And that is that, you know, as everyone I'm sure knows, Paramount and Skydance have been pursuing a merger for some time. The merger was initially expected to close in early 2025, but the deal was held up for months by the Trump administration's FCC over, quote, news distortion, a complaint filed against CBS News.
Bullshit. That's bullshit.
Trump's lawsuit against CBS News over the 60-minute segment featuring Kamala Harris, and CBS News agreeing to pay $16 million in a settlement despite the unanimous view of legal experts that suit had no merit. Now there is reports out there that as part of that settlement, CBS News has agreed to give $20 million in essentially free advertising for conservative causes. So we're talking about bribes. When we talk about that, we're talking about the president using the office of the presidency to conduct and continue his personal vendettas, his personal grievances, and also to wield the power of the federal government just to make more money for himself. And so that is one thing we have to keep in mind here. Once this merger went through, I believe it got approved in late July and finalized just days ago. The guy in charge of Paramount is now going to be David Ellison, who is the 42-year-old son of Oracle founder Larry Ellison. And basically everyone involved in this deal, from Skydance to CBS to the Redstones, who were the previous owners, people who built CBS basically from the old school cable days, everyone had $1 million, hundreds of millions of dollars riding on this deal going through. And there you had the Trump administration stalling it out, holding it because of this grievance. And so you had all of this not even happening behind the scenes, happening in public, but kind of outside the sphere of the MMA bubble. And then in April, Dana White, Donald Trump, Ari Emanuel, and David Ellison all show up at the UFC together. They're all sitting cage side. A month later, Ari Emanuel comes out publicly. He voices his support for this merger. He says in May, he said they should do this. He supports Skydance and Paramount coming together. And so Skydance and Paramount do, in fact, get their merger okayed. They get the blessing of the FCC. And so you have this situation, this merger gets okayed. One of their first big high profile moves, aside from inking a big deal with South Park, is to give the UFC this huge deal. So the question here, I suppose, is did Dana White and Ari Emanuel help smooth things over between Trump and David Ellison and Skydance on the road to getting this merger approved? And if so, what, if any, bearing did that then have on Paramount giving the UFC this huge deal, which, by the way, by some early accounts from industry experts, they have maybe possibly like grossly overpaid for? Like, I guess, is Paramount pulling a Bud Light here? In a way, are they?
There's at least some reason to think that, right? Because everything that has been going on over there in regards to this whole, Skydance situation, the change in what we're doing, everything seems to be pointed in a certain kind of political direction, right? We're canceling some shows. We're telling you we're going to give you all this money for conservative causes. We're cozying up to the most right-wing sports brand. We're using them as kind of a go-between so that we can get in Trump's ear and get clearance to go ahead and do this shit. Like, it is an age of unchecked corruption at the top in American government, and they seem to be like, that's the path. That's how you go, is you lean into that corruption, you pay your bribes, and you hope that it comes back to you in some way. And so it seems like, at least when that's already the narrative, that we don't want to swim against this stream at all. We want to swim with it, and we think that it will pay off somewhere down the line. And then you go and get in bed with the sports property that Trump at this point is most closely associated with, the one that he can show up at and be cheered, the one that he attends like he's David Spade in the early 2000s. Like, all that still points in the same direction. And so that absolutely seems like that has to be a part of it, right?
I mean, we can't say for sure, but if Trump and Dana White and Ari Emanuel and David Ellison are sitting there front row at the UFC, all 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row, what else are they talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Just shooting the shit about whatever prelim fighters are going out there.
They're
No,
not
what are they talking about?
How they think Joshua Van has a bright future. That's not the conversation that they're having. So, it's a lot of looking like a duck and quacking like a duck out
there. David Ellison is saying a lot of kind of troubling shit as the new head of this company. He wouldn't really confirm or deny a deal with Trump. When reporters asked him on Thursday, he said, quote, "We're focused on the future," which is some Mark McGuire, "I'm not here to talk about my past" steroid shit, or maybe like, what did Bill Belichick say? "We're on to Buffalo," something like that. He kept saying. So that's some shit like that. His first move once this merger had been closed was to show up at CBS News, like Logan Roy fucking walking out into the newsroom in succession, right, to give his pep talk, talking about quote,
kind of exactly like that, honestly.
Yeah, talking about he wants a fact-based news company, which that's the news, a news broadcast for all people, he is saying. And so, there's every sign here seems to be pointing in one direction. Meanwhile, employees at CBS News are bracing for layoffs since Ellison has signaled to Wall Street. This, I believe, is from Gizmodo, perhaps Deadline. Ellison has signaled to Wall Street that he expects, quote, to not only achieve but meaningfully exceed the $2 billion in real efficiencies that we previously announced. So sounds like there's some layoffs coming to Paramount and CBS. They've talked about bringing in Bari Weiss as in a prominent role.
Really?
So yeah, so this stuff is all kind of going on, not even behind the scenes, but not necessarily the thing that MMA fans are focused on, but that is a factor in one form or another.
Man, these people start talking about efficiencies, Chad.
Yeah.
Update those resumes,
Can you hop on a call with HR real quick?
Mm-hmm. We just got finished talking about our efficiencies, and we need you in a meeting right away. So, yeah.
Going back years, I have to say, you may remember I said this maybe like at the beginning of the ESPN Plus deal, or when it turned out that not only were you going to have to get in the door at ESPN Plus to even be eligible to buy the pay-per-views, I said, give me a price I can pay for all the stuff.
You did say that.
I said this a long time ago, and I was like, if you're a person who buys pay-per-views every month and Paramount Plus is $40 a month, you still save money. You're still saving money.
Don't do this.
I'm just saying, this is the thing that I would be a hypocrite if I didn't sit there and say this seems good because this is what I said that I wanted years ago. So it remains to be seen though how it plays out.
Yeah, especially because like let's think about this. Like Paramount Plus, they need to have regular ass subscribers too.
Yeah,
This
that's
can't
true.
just like
That's
it
true.
can't just be if you stake your entire streaming business on MMA fans, it's not going to last that long. There's just not enough of us. And especially if you stake your business on getting us to pay for MMA streams when so many people have spent years as MMA fans without ever paying for a UFC pay-per-view. Like there a lot of people are just so used to that they're going to be off the table anyway. Like Paramount Plus has to look at this in terms of like we are getting into live sports because we kind of have to if we want to be a successfully competing streaming service. All these streaming services are out there now. We're all kind of competing for some version of the same audience, trying to get them to pay our increasing streaming service fees. And the others are adding live sports. You know, Netflix is adding Amazon Prime is adding them. Like they're all doing it. Peacock has it. If we are just the people where it's just like we got Yellowstone, and we got Sylvester Stallone show or some shit, like it's just not going to be enough to really compete with those people. And so that's what they're thinking when they add this. It can't just be that though.
Right.
Like you're not going to run. I think if it's $12.99 to start, I think I could believe that. And if we end up by year 2 at $15.99, I guess I wouldn't be surprised. If you get up north of 20, I think you get in shaky territory, So it's still probably a good deal for fight fans.
Yeah. No, obviously I'm being a little facetious when I say $40, but this price will go up. But at what point does it stop being worthwhile for UFC fans? It does say something, I feel like, specific about our relationship with this sport and potentially the abusive relationship that we are in with it. When this news comes out and we realize that it might become cheaper coming up in 2026 to be a UFC fan, and our response is like, no, they wouldn't do that. That is impossible to imagine that would happen.
Not how it works. Yeah.
Widespread skepticism about how this is going to play out. I guess I also have to ask myself whether or not I need to adjust my timeline of my prediction that TKO will sell to the Saudis within 5 years. Like this could push that back if all of a sudden we're raking in 1.1 billion a year just to sit at home and watch, if Ari Emanuel just has to sit at home and watch John Jones fight Tom Aspinall at the White House and this money comes pouring in, they might hang on to this thing for a while.
Well, and you saw the stock price jump as soon as news of this deal came in. So
I feel like it would have been real interesting to have some tracking on who bought that stock and when. You know what I mean? This might be interesting to know.
Maybe people in the Trump administration perhaps might have got in early, is what you're saying?
Yeah. All right, that is going to do it this week, unless you want to spend 4 minutes talking about UFC 319.
Okay, we should at least, I'm sure we'll end up talking about this on our other Patreon offerings throughout the week. Shout out to those Patreon members and a slight encouragement to those considering becoming Patreon members. But man, can you imagine being the big homie DDP? You still got points on the pay-per-view. You're still hoping to make your nut out there, and they're out, and everybody's celebrating the death of pay-per-view, and you're like, before you have kind of your biggest fight ever, and you're just like, hold on, hold up, guys. I would like us to maybe think about buying this one. Think about all the money you're going to be saving next year. Take some of that money, spend it on my title defense against Hamza Chimaev here, because like also you probably got to be thinking like, this really sucked up a lot of the oxygen in the room in terms of UFC news. I got to fight fucking Saturday night. It's coming right up, guys.
Yeah, just buy this one for nostalgia purposes.
Yeah, pretty soon you won't be able to do this anymore, you guys. You're going to want this experience.
I was there the last 4 or 5 months when they did pay-per-views. That's what you'll be able to tell your grandkids.
They're going to be so impressed when you tell them that too.
All right, that's going to do it this week for the Co-Main Event podcast. As Ben mentioned, we'd love to have you join us over at the Patreon page. We're there all week long. Wednesday, tomorrow, the live chat. I'm sure this will come up. People will probably have questions about the UFC moving over there to Paramount. So we'll probably talk about that. We got Doing the Damn Thing on Thursday when we talk about items unrelated to MMA. This week we had a pretty good discussion about Tim Robinson's new movie Friendship, which we both watched. That'll be coming out on Thursday. And then Friday for the Power Hour leading into this weekend where they got UFC 319. So I'm sure there will be some talk about that on Friday. Come on over, patreon.com/co-main event. That'll get you in the door. We'd love to have you on the team. As for right now, though, thanks everybody for listening. We are done. We are through. We are out. Ben, you got nominated for Journalist of the Year.
I did. How about that?
Had to go out in the backyard and take a new picture.
Yeah. It was, just telling BK, like, all right, I need some headshots. And she was like, hey, we can go down to the dance studio at the university. They got a whole like backdrop thing. We can do the lighting. And I was like, whoa. I'll tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to shave, take a shower, do my hair.
You didn't shave before this picture.
I want to shave my neck.
Okay.
Trim the beard a little bit. And then we're going to walk out into the backyard. And if we're not done in 10 minutes, I'm going to be disappointed. And that's exactly what we did.
What happens if you win this? What happens if you are the person who dethrones Ariel Helwani's like 10-year streak of winning this thing? Do you then get fired from the Uncrowned?
I think what happens is everybody knows that we hacked in and rigged the vote. No one believes for a second. But you know what? The important thing is that when all the co-maniacs are going over there to vote for me, as is their solemn duty, that they also remember to vote for the Uncrowned as best media source, because that one we can and frankly should win.
You got to go vote for him, people. He shaved his neck for this.